Rich, today we're sitting down with Jeremy Streten. He's the founder of Business Legal Lifecycle. He's written a book in 3 countries that entrepreneurs should be reading. He also has a website, businesslegallifecycle.com. And today we talk about all the vulnerabilities that entrepreneurs potentially have when setting up or running their business through their life cycle.
And I love his take on clearly identifying where someone is today and where they want to go with their business. And he even has an automated tool to identify what the risks are and have recommendations. And at the end of the episode, our listeners even get a website for a nice coupon code as well.
Absolutely. So if you want to learn from a holistic perspective, what are some exposures you may have in your business and things you can actually actionably take to your attorney to help polish up and make sure you're ready for your life cycle, look forward to this episode today with Jeremy Streten. Jeremy, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. You're with Business Legal Lifecycle. We're talking to you right now from Australia, so while it's coming to the end of our day, it's way at the beginning of your day right now. We appreciate you coming on and talking with us. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. You have a global business. It's a software as a service business, and it's in the legal space. That's what I know. Fill us in on exactly what you guys do.
Yeah, well, not only is it the morning, it's actually the next morning, John. So first of all, thank you for having me on. I can tell you that the next day does happen and it's all good. So
we're not even on the same day.
No, we're on tomorrow, so it's all good. But thank you very much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to our interview today. So the Business Legal Lifecycle is a business that I started out of a frustration that I have. So I'm a lawyer. I have been for around 20 years now. And it was born out of a frustration that I had with the legal profession being too reactive. So people come to lawyers when they've got a problem and they want to try and solve that problem. But so often they could have prevented that problem from occurring. So they could have been proactive in their legal advice. And so the life cycle was really born out of that frustration. So I had a couple of clients that I acted for where one client lost $1 million of other people's money, and another client almost lost $2 million of their own money, where if they just got legal advice, they could have saved all of their hassles. So what I did is I developed the Business Legal Lifecycle, which is around helping business owners to understand what it is they need to do from a legal perspective in their business, why they need to do it, and then who they need to get help with so they can go and solve those problems before they arise.
Gotcha. And I'm very curious on this aspect of it. Sometimes business and legal issues are very regional in their approach, but you have a global business. Are you suggesting by the nature of that a lot of the common issues, whether you're running a business in Australia, you're running it in Sweden, or you're running in the United States or Canada, typically the entrepreneurs make the same mistakes?
Not only do they make the same mistakes, John, but the way of solving them is very similar. It's just done in a different way. So what we do is very high level. So it's high level. This is what you need to do and why you need to do it, so that you can then go to your lawyer or attorney or solicitor, whatever they call it in the country, and work out how to solve the problem. So I was very surprised about this, John, when I first wrote my book and I did it for the Australian market. And then I went to a conference. My wife's an academic, and I went to a conference in London. And it was a conference with academics from all over the world. And it was about what they call executory contracts in insolvency law. A boring topic, but you go because your wife, you want to do the right thing with your wife and you go along. But what I realized was listening to people from Eastern Europe, from South America, from Asia, from all over Europe, the law was essentially the same. It was just how they apply it that's different. And so that really inspired me to then go and research all these other countries, including the US and Canada and the UK, where I realized that at a high level, what we need to do in business and the mistakes we make in business are very similar across the board. It's just in the implementation that we do that. So that's why what we do is we help you identify what the issues are, and then if you don't have a lawyer, we can actually help refer you to a lawyer so that they can actually go and implement it. If I tried to build a platform that tried to solve all those legal problems, well, I don't think I'd have enough hours in my life to do all that around the world.
Then I can understand that. Then, so I need to ask this question. Obviously, I think at the end of this, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be like, look, there's a software out there that can help you identify these issues, but let's pretend there was no software and the software was you for a minute. Yep. What are the recurring macro issues that us entrepreneurs fail to see as plainly as your software and as you see?
So, great question. There's so many of them. So let's start with probably the most important one.
Okay.
And that is before getting any sort of legal advice, before doing anything in that space, you need to know where you're heading. And so often people don't think about it, and lawyers don't ask this question. So, what's the goal of what you're trying to achieve? Because that colors what you actually need to do and what the right advice for you is. So, people often, we call it barbecue advice in Australia, where you go to a barbecue and you listen to your friend and they say, "Oh, I started a company and it was, they told me to set up this company or this LLC in the US or LLP in the UK." But people don't get that advice based on their own personal circumstances. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I see fail. And then what happens is 6 months, a year, 10 years down the track, it's all set up wrong, and that costs them a lot of money.
Hmm.
The second one would be around agreements. When you start a business, you get super excited and you want to get in there and you want to start the business, and you want to start working with your clients and start doing all that fun stuff. But what happens is you neglect actually putting an agreement in place with your customers, with your suppliers, and even with your employees. And it's all well and good at the time, but then in the future, if there's a problem, then you don't have any actual agreement documented. And one of the things that I've always taken away from law is if you end up having to go to court, a judge knows that there's your side of the story, there's the other side of the story, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. That's just the nature of it, right? And that's just the nature of human relationships. So they're the two biggest ones that I see. And if people you get one thing out of this podcast, I'd say make sure that you know where you're heading, at least in the short term, and then so that your advice can tailor to that. And always document your agreements. I know they're boring. I know that I write them and I read them all day, every day.
Yeah.
I know they are, but they're so crucial for you understanding what you need to do.
Jeremy, I heard what you said. Makes sense. What's the goal of what you're trying to achieve? I'd love to ground it in reality, because I'm sitting here going, okay, like, how is that related with me needing an attorney and so forth? So, hypothetically, let's say I'm a small business owner and I sell residential paint jobs. And you ask me, what's a goal I'm trying to achieve? I want to achieve $3 million in revenue at somewhere around a 12% EBITDA. So my profit. And I just want to sell a whole bunch of paint jobs. That's what I want to achieve.
Yeah, great. And if that's what you want to achieve, I was going to say all you want to achieve, but that's a pretty big goal. So that then will help for the lawyer, say, in setting up your business, to tell you how to structure that business properly, but also take into account your personal needs, Rich. So it will also look at what are your personal what's your personal circumstances, and then that helps determine what you want to go. And there's nothing wrong with building a business like that. But then also coming back to the agreements, well, every time you go and paint a customer's house, you should have an agreement with them about what you're going to do, what the scope of that work is. What happens if something goes wrong? I like to think of agreements as disagreements, Rich. So I like to think of them as what happens if there's a problem, if there's a disagreement. So it does come into all of it. Not everyone needs to build a big company and sell it off, but it's important to know what that is at the outset to get the advice right.
And I pick paint jobs because it happens to be a business that I'm in, is consulting with franchise owners who sell residential paint jobs, but and commercial. But it could be any widget, right? So I want to sell these iPad pens. What's my goal? Yeah, I want to sell a whole bunch of them. That's my goal. I need to get to my break-even point as fast as possible. I need to make a bunch of money. Yes, I want to provide opportunity for my family and my friends. I'm still not connecting with, how are you going to help me? Like, what are the different structures that I should be considering if I go, yeah, I just want to sell a bunch of my widget of a product or service?
So that's where the skill of the lawyer asking deeper questions, like you said, just selling a widget like a pen,
Yeah.
but then you also said, oh, but I want to provide for my family and friends. So that's where the lawyer actually can, and this is why it's very hard to make an automated product for this, right? And this is where the skill of the lawyer comes in, is to really ask what's behind that. And I use the 5 whys. So why is that important? And then go to the next level, and then go to the next level, and then go to the next level. So I think at a superficial level, that might seem the case, Rich. But I think if if the skill of the lawyer is to get deeper into that, into what's important to you, then that will help. And look, across the world, there's all the different structures that you can have. And depending on whether or not you want to set it up for a lifestyle business where you're just selling these widgets and you're getting X amount of money out of it, so that you can then go and provide for your family, so that you could go. People change their goals as well, so that needs to be put in place as well. So I think, yes, a lot of people start a business like that, but there's always something deeper. There's always a story that they have, and if you can get to that real why, not only can you provide better advice, but you actually also provide a better experience for the client, and where they're going to want to come back to you on a more regular basis. Talking from a lawyer's perspective, where we can actually provide that proactive advice. So that's where I'd go for that. I'd say that it would never actually be just that one thing. There's always something more behind it.
So you would go and work with your clients and dig a little bit deeper. If you were to ask me the 5 whys, I have a feeling I'd end up somewhere around, I want to provide a particular lifestyle for my wife and my children, and I want to have some lifestyle myself so I can enjoy it with them and just not be constantly working. You then may turn around and advise me on what is a structure that is going to avert risk from that lifestyle and being a provider that I'd like to be. And you'll explore a bunch of avenues. What about the risk in a recession? What about the risk if somebody sues you? What about the risk if you die? And we'll talk about all the structure options around there. Did I pick up what you're laying down there?
Absolutely, yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. But that and that advice needs to come from the lawyer, because it's so personalized to the individual. And look, most of the time, it's probably a very similar structure to what you thought it would be at the outset. It's worth, though, getting that advice to make sure that it's right, because there's one important element that was missing in what you said. So first of all, is to find out what that goal is, and if that's the goal, but then also what's your current situation. So not only what your goal is, and I said it before, but this is really important. What's your current situation? Do you have structures in place? Do you have a home? Is that in your own name? Do you have do you have investment properties? What entities are those in? Are those in your own name too? Because that also needs to color the advice. So you need to know where you're heading, and also where you are now, so that you can go what the right advice is. Because just the other day, I was advising a client who was starting a business, and he wanted to start it in his own name, but he has about 5 properties in his own name. And that would be a bad idea. So over here, we have what are called proprietary limited companies. They're like corporations in the US. And that was a better one for him, because it's a separate structure for his risky asset, and that protects his properties from anything going wrong with his business. And if I didn't ask those questions, I wouldn't know that. And if he just wanted to start up as a sole trader, because that's what he's done for all his properties, then that could, if something went wrong in the future, he could lose those properties if he didn't do that. And that, I mentioned in the outset, one of the catalysts for me coming up with this was a client who almost lost $2 million of his own money. And that was because a business failed and all his properties were in his own name. And because the business failed and got sued, he could have lost all those properties. Well, luckily we were able to save it. But if he'd got advice, he should never have had the business and the properties in the same name.
I think I got it, because I went to an attorney and I said, hey, I want to set up a trust. And the attorney said, okay, and walked me through the process of setting up a trust. What my attorney did not do is what your unique value proposition is. My attorney did not say, got it, you think you want a trust. Before we talk about trust, where are you now with all things going on financially, and what you own, and then where do you want to go, and then identify the risks involved for me to get from where I am to where I want to go, and talk about, is a trust the right thing that I need now, or do I need something else in addition to it, or in replacement of it? I didn't have that conversation with my attorney. I said I wanted a trust, and my attorney said, okay, let's get a trust.
And Rich, I'd like to take it a step further. like I connect as well at the same time you are with what Jeremy's talking about, because if you think you need a trust and you go to a trust attorney, what's the trust attorney going to talk to you about? The fact that you need a trust. It's a single silo of the process. And I think what Jeremy's talking about is your example was perfect. So what do you want to do? I don't know. I want to sell widgets. I want to make some money. Well,
Right.
maybe on the onset of starting up your business, you should be thinking about, and this may be the lead in, Jeremy, to everything, if I'm connecting right. What is the business life cycle that you are going to go through, and all the things you should be thinking about now before you set up or in the process of growing your business before it's too late to realize you're getting sued. And when you first set up your company, you should have had a trust, not now. Am I connecting with the business life cycle? That's one thing I maybe we should go straight to. What is
Mm.
the business life cycle? Because really what we're talking about right now is startup. When you start up your business, you should be thinking about these things, but not all businesses are in startup mode. I mean, there are entrepreneurs listening to this right now that are not set up for these types of situations in their life cycle.
Yes, absolutely. So there are 13 phases to the life cycle, and basically, it actually, whilst we've talked about startups, and it's a very important part of the puzzle, and my book goes through what you need to do from a startup phase, and it goes through the rest of the phases. The SaaS tool that you mentioned before, John, that we'll talk about as we go through, that actually is better for businesses being in business for about 2 years because they've made a lot of the legal mistakes and there's gaps because it identifies the gaps. So for a business that's been going for a couple of years, they need to really, if they haven't got that legal advice, because let's face it, most lawyers don't do that. And my goal is to change the way that people view lawyers. But there's a step before that. It's actually the way that lawyers view their clients, because they see them just as you said. It's like for a woodworker, every problem can be solved with a hammer. With a hammer. And and so it can just be solved and solved and solved with the problem that you identify. Whereas you need to have the impetus to know that there might be other solutions that are out there. And so the 13 phases go through what that journey is for a business, and really it's about setting you up to sell your business or exit your business at some point. So there are 13 phases. Phase 11 is sale of the business, and basically it's about getting all the legal parts of the business in place so that you can sell the business for the highest value. And when you see the life cycle, people go to the website and they can see the actual life cycle. They'll see that the phase 11 is at the height of the curve, because that's where we want you to get to, so that when you exit the business, because we'll all exit all of our businesses at some time, you want to maximize the value that you get for it at that time.
I think you've got a powerful why in change the way people see lawyers or attorneys and change the way that lawyers or attorneys see their clients. I mean, that is a global, powerful, gripping why. Can you describe for me, how do you think people see lawyers or attorneys? And then how do you think they should? So if you were successful in this, you would change people from thinking this to thinking what?
So at the moment, what I see, and this is from my interactions with clients and around the world, really, it's three main things. The first one is they just see them as price driven, and that they're going to be charged on 6 minute increments or 1 minute increments or whatever it is, the old billable hour, and they see them as just someone who's just going to do that to them. They see them as people who just solve problems after they arise, and they see them as people who they use big words and they use fancy language, and so there's a divide between the two. And so to answer your question, Rich, around what I'm trying to change for those three things, the first one is if you're a lawyer who has any sort of experience, you should never charge on time because you should know what the work is that you achieve. So everything should be value pricing or fixed pricing because you know what you're doing, right? And you know the value that you're giving. So there should be no more time costing. So that's one thing that I believe should come out of the mix. The second one around the way that people view lawyers is really changing that mindset so that they're being that proactive advice when they come to the lawyers. So really understanding what they need to do. And around the third one, not everything needs to be big, complicated Latin terms. Not everything needs to be these legal terms. Everything can be in plain English and should be readable and accessible for everyone. So we've created like an online course which actually teaches people, and there's heaps of free resources on our website to actually teach people what they need to say. And I remember when I first published my book, I was actually getting my house renovated where I am now, and the foreman of the job saw my book in a pile in my downstairs where I got it delivered. And he said, "What's this?" And I said, "Oh, it's a book about business law and how you actually what you need to do." And he said, "I'm never going to understand that." And I said, "Take it away and read it." And he came back about a week later and said, "I actually understand this. It's actually in plain English. I actually get what I need to do." And that was a real moment for me where I went, "Yeah, I've actually achieved something that I wanted to achieve here by explaining things in plain English." So what I see is that more proactive relationship between lawyers and their clients, and where people aren't scared of the 6 minute increment. They're not scared of just coming to the lawyers when there's a problem, actually solving problems before they arise. And that comes back to I said before, changing the way that people view lawyers, but also the way that lawyers view people. And that really comes back to the whole not using fancy language, not pretending that we're some people in some ivory tower, that we're special. Yes, we've got a degree. Yes, we know we have a special skill set, but so does everyone. Someone painting a house, I couldn't do that. They have a skill set. And so lawyers need to recognize the fact that they're not better than anyone else. And unfortunately, there's a lot of lawyers out there that do, and that creates a problem in the community. What we need to do as a profession is realize we're just like everyone else, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. And we just have a skill set where we can help people to achieve their goals. So that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm.
Yeah,
what I
that's
want to change
great.
around the world.
I could see how this complicated part and switching from that perception to making it easy, I could see how lawyers intentionally play into that. Because
Mm.
so long as I keep it complicated, you're going to have to keep coming back to me. Because if I make this look really easy, it's actually going to reduce my income billing you on these 6 minute increments. So, man, does that sound good? If I were going to work with an attorney on a proactive level with fixed pricing and they're going to make it really easy, yeah, I could see how that's an image that serves both sides.
And it's a really scarcity mindset from the lawyers. I'm dealing with a matter just now. I won't go into any details, but it's very, very clear that the lawyer is just sending letters to up their fees, and they're just deliberately, for no reason, just sending it off, and that's because they're charging on a billable hour, and I was saying this to my wife last night. It really gives the profession a bad name, and it's really sad that this happens. And there is a better way of doing things. So that's something that the message that when I talk in podcasts, when I talk around the world, something that I'm very passionate about is around changing that way. But lawyers have to do it first. The way that my business coach, who I work with now, he because I do a bit of business coaching as well. He said to me before I had children, he said, "You get what you project."
Mm.
And and he was saying that in the context of children, but the same applies for lawyers with their clients. If you project this, I'm better than you, and I'm better than this, and I'm better than that, then that's what you're going to get back from your clients. And so it's really upon us first to change the way that we view our clients and the nature of our work.
Yeah, I love that. And it definitely, what connects with me throughout this whole conversation is numerous times I've called attorneys and said, I need to set up an LLC. I need a limited liability company here in the US. And their question is, well, are you sure you need a limited liability company? Let's make sure that that's the right format.
Mhm.
And we have that one why. Well, why do you need an LLC? And I answer the question and we look through it. Okay, you need an LLC. Let's do it. But they don't ask the four other whys behind that, which is, well, what are you trying to do with this company? What's your ultimate goal of this business? Are you going to be set up that way? Oh, you're going to get a bank loan. It's going to be personally guaranteed. What else do you have in your personal name? What else is going on over here? Have you thought about getting a trust? They don't look at it holistically.
Mm.
I've had a very hard time finding that holistic approach. And for me personally, what worked ultimately is I had to build my own team of a financial advisor, a CPA, and an attorney, a state attorney, to be like, okay, this is now my advisory team. Let's go figure this out. But it took me 20 years to figure out that's what I needed in order to fully protect myself holistically. I
Mm.
think what you're saying with your product, whether you're a startup or there's different phases of growth of your business, whether you're in 2 years, 5 years, you're near exit, whatever, that what your software can do is ask a set of questions a survey mode, which will give you a clear report to say, hey, you should think about these things to clean up kind of your structure here to prepare yourself for the best success throughout your business life cycle. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And so how long does this take? How much does it cost? Where do they go find it? Things like that.
Yeah, so great questions. So the test only takes 10 minutes. It's only about 30 questions. And depending on how you answer some, there's some second questions. That's why I say about 30 questions. It's not designed to go into the depth of your business. If it did that, as I said before, it would be way too complicated. I want to give you something that only takes you 10 minutes because everyone's busy, but it gives you that high level output. So it has a report, so legal assessment report that you get that outlines where you are in the life cycle. So out of those 13 phases, where are you? What have you missed up until that point? And also gives you a plan for what you need to do next, right? And so that's a PDF to get. You also get a portal on our website where you can go in and actually check off the things that you need, and then you can also get referrals to lawyers in there. The cost is $97 for that assessment. As a thank you for having me on, though, I've created a webpage on our page, which is businesslegallifecycle.com/united. And that's for the name of the podcast, not for any fans of Manchester United over in the UK. My brother-in-law's a big Manchester United fan. So when I was creating, I was thinking of him. And they can do that for 50% off. And that gives them a report that goes through their business that they can either take to their attorney, or that they can work, or we can refer them to an attorney that will be able to work with them to basically get rid of those legal risks. And it creates that conversation so that they're being proactive and not reactive.
Okay.
And can you repeat that website real quick? Business Leader Lifecycle, is it .com/United?
Yeah, /United. Yes.
Okay.
So businesslegallifecycle.com/United. And the listeners can see that there. They can also explore the website. There are literally hundreds of pages of content of free advice to give people an understanding and education around what they need to do from a legal perspective in their business and why they need to do it. Because I'm very passionate. The assessment really helps you to understand what's missing in your business, but I also want you to understand why you need to do that. The report does explain that. There's also lots of content on there to help you to understand that as well.
Well, that's fantastic. And how long has this business been going?
So I have been doing the business legal lifecycle for about 6 years now. And I started in Australia. It was I mentioned that I went to the UK first. That was about a year and a half into it. I went to the UK, and then I was like, I need to find a UK lawyer. I partnered with a UK lawyer, helped me write the book there. Then I was like, I need to go to the US because you're the biggest market in the world and the most number of businesses, and did that as well. And in 2018, we won. For where I live in Australia, I live in a state called Queensland. Didn't change its name to Kingsland, despite what some people thought when the Queen passed away. And we got a king in Australia, and we won the Queensland Law Society Innovation in Law Award back in 2018, beating out all the big guys because of the assessment and what we put together.
That's awesome. Well, the way I look at it, $50 for our listeners to go do an assessment report on where you may have vulnerabilities could save them, as you said, millions potentially in their life cycle. And I think it's a great tool to kind of just take the time to look back at what you're doing. Sometimes we just run too fast. Rich said it very well. I just want to sell widgets. Mm-hmm. And you start doing that, and then you sold a lot of widgets, and you look back and go, oh my gosh, I'm vulnerable here. And there's tons of different exposure areas. So I appreciate you bringing this to our audience. Love to go do this for myself and one of my businesses and just see kind of the report that I get out of it, so we can further promote this. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure people can actually go get the book as well on Amazon, Business Legal Lifecycle. Sounds like reading the book may be a good practice as well.
What I'd say on that, absolutely. And make sure that, depending on where you're listening, that you get the right book. So there's a US edition, there's a UK edition, and there's an Australian edition. They're all on Amazon, but just make sure you get the right one for you. I don't want US people getting the Australian version or the UK version. So just make sure you get the right one.
Great advice. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for your time. This was fantastic, and look forward to checking out your product.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode. Rich, I truly believe that as entrepreneurs set up their businesses, this is an important task. But I can tell you, the amount of entrepreneurs with businesses that I've met at 5, 10 years of their business that still don't have a clean operating agreement, don't have a buy-sell agreement, have everything in their name, have bank guarantees over here, and they haven't holistically looked at all of their exposure areas, both as a business and as them personally, is outstanding in a bad way. I just cannot believe it. But I've been there too, because as an entrepreneur, you just want to sell those widgets. You just want to go, you want to create something. And the last thing you're thinking about is all the legalese and things you need to do. I love what Jeremy has because it's a holistic macro level view for $50 that you can actually go get, that you can actually go bring and have a conversation with your attorney or your business partners or your spouse or whatever you need to do, and then actionably correct some of these areas. I think it's a first that I've seen of this particular kind. I know we talked to Matt Davis about a few weeks ago about another legal assessment, but this one's a little bit different as a software. Love it, and I think every entrepreneur should take a look at this.
I've never even heard of a software that provides legal advice like that to business owners, and for it to just be a 10-minute assessment, like that's pretty cool. When we were talking about the where are you and where to go and evaluating the risk, and we said, how many phases are there in the life cycle? Prior to hearing his answer, how many would you have said there were? I'll tell you, I would have said there were probably 4. And if you ask me, well, what are they? I probably couldn't even say them cleanly, but I would have said there are like 3 or 4. How many would you have said?
Maybe 5 or 6, but not much more than that. I think it'd be cool to just articulate what those are. I mean, just to be clear, when he looks at the business life cycle, he kind of looks at kind of the ups and downs, right, of growing a business, and ultimately you're out. But it goes from stuff like conception to startup to having initial clients to bringing on new employees to protecting your IP, maximizing your current business, all the way up to selling. I've just skipped 4 or 5 steps to retirement, and then basically winding up the business potentially even. So there's so many steps involved, and considering everything you should be thinking about through all of those steps is a little overwhelming.
Well, the average between the two of us is what, 4.5 steps that we would have guessed. And the fact that there are 13 phases to a life cycle certainly warrants a book, and certainly warrants evaluation in terms of where you are in it. So I'm looking forward to recommending a couple of our owners take it and check out the value of it. One other thing that I'd mention is I liked his take on agreements. We really look at them as disagreements. I've never heard that before. That's obviously a play on words that is very notable. That's like, why do you have agreements? Well, you have agreements to settle disagreements. Of course.
I love that twist, right? Let's have a prenup agreement.
Right.
Right? It's because at some point, if we disagree, let's agree now on what we're going to disagree about. And it makes things so much easier too, by the way. Like, if you can structure and even have that conversation, if you and I were coming up with something right now and be like, look, let's put something together. So if ever we disagree, we know how to disband this thing. Because when you don't, it's a disaster and it turns into legal disputes and everything else. The other piece that I love that I took away beyond the 5 whys, I know you and I subscribe to the 5 whys, at a very high level. I love what he talked about in terms of barbecue advice, because I think that's how entrepreneurs typically do their business. If I was to start a business, I'd be, hey, Rich, I was thinking of starting a business. How do you think I should set it up? And I'm talking to you, and your advice may be really good, but you're not an expert in everything legal opinion on business. But I'll get the barbecue advice from my friends and family, and that's probably what I'll end up doing, because I don't want to pay the legal fees to go do it. And I certainly have been victim to this so many times in my life, which is penny wise, dollar foolish. I don't want to spend the extra dollars to make sure I'm protected, but then it hits me some other way in a 10x level.
Well, and just to be clear, on Australia, it would be shrimp on the bobby.
Fair.
A subtone he mentioned was you get what you project. And that was one of the things I highlighted in my notes, that you get what you project. And as an attorney, if you project an air of arrogance, you're going to create that as your image, and you're going to get something back that is in response to arrogance. And I'd say, just as a subtone, it's a good reminder for me and you that you get what you project, and be conscious of what it is you're projecting, because it's going to impact what you get in return.